Good morning and welcome to today's State Legislative House Representative Candidate Forum, sponsored by the Lakeville Area Chamber of Commerce. I'm Glenn Starfield, the owner of Express Employment Professionals and a member of the Lakeville Area Chamber of Commerce Business Advocacy Committee, and will be your moderator today. The timekeeper is for the forum is Tim Roach, the president of the Lakeville Area Chamber of Commerce. I'd like to now introduce each 2014 State House Representative legislative candidates by district and by alphabetical last name. House District 56B, encompassing Northwest Lakeville, Mr. Will Morgan, who unfortunately could not be with us today, and Ms. Roz Peterson. House District 57A, encompassing Northeast Lakeville, Mr. Brooke Fulken, who unfortunately couldn't be with us today, and Ms. Tara Mack. House District 58A, encompassing Central and Southern Lakeville area, Mr. John Kosnick and Miss Amy Willingham. Thank you for being here today. The format for today's forum will be as followed. Candidates were provided proposed questions in advance with the understanding that we would also take spontaneous audience questions. At the front registration table is paper for the audience to write down proposed questions. Questions cannot be directed at any individual candidates and need to be answered by all candidates. Please give your proposed questions to Mr. Tim Roach, who's here in the front, and he will give the appropriate questions to me to ask at various times. Due to time constraints, we may not get to all the questions. Each candidate will receive 2 minutes for opening remarks and to respond to each of the questions. Finally, each candidate will receive 1 minute for wrap-up and closing remarks. With 30 seconds remaining, Mr. Tim Roach will hold up a sign, and then and then he'll hold up the stop time when your time is up, so please pay attention to Tim. A straw poll was done to determine the starting order, which Mr. Kosnick polled, and we will proceed in clockwise order with each candidate getting an opportunity to be the first to answer each question. Do you have any questions? If not, then let's get started. So we'll begin with opening remarks and Mr. John Kosnick. And the microphone. Sorry, John.
Good morning. My name is John Kosnick, and I am the Republican endorsed candidate for the Lakeville House District. Thank you to the committee for putting the forum together and to those here and watching at home. It's been an honor to campaign and meet so many Lakeville residents door to door and around town. I've been active in the Lakeville business and volunteer community since my wife and I moved here 14 years ago. What made you decide to run for office is a great question. I was raised with a sense of responsibility to be involved, and I think we are all called to defend freedom and by our faith to serve more than ourselves. Representing Lakeville is an extension of that community service. My appreciation for our representative style of government is uniquely rooted in me because I was born in Colombia, a country that doesn't have the same level of opportunity that we have here in the United States. When I was 5 years old, my mom died. An older sister didn't have the means to take care of me, but fortunately I was adopted by an American family. I sometimes reflect on the life that I might have had if I hadn't been so blessed to realize the freedoms and opportunities that we have here in America. Today, because of increasing taxes and excessive regulation, it's getting harder to achieve the American dream and to do better than the generation before us. I'm working to bring more balance to our debate in our state government with a fiscally responsible, sensible approach that focuses on the core items of our education, transportation, healthcare, and job growth. I ask you to vote for John Kosnick to help preserve the American dream. For more information, visit johnkosnick.mn. Thank you.
All right. Ms. Willingham.
Hi, my name is Amy Willingham. I grew up here in Lakeville as Amy Ganya. I was highly involved in activities and athletics and also socializing when I was in high school. I went on to play Division I college volleyball at Northwestern University in Evanston, Illinois, I then got a degree, graduate degree in physical therapy, and during that time I fell in love with a Lakeville school teacher and volleyball coach named Steve. So I came back to Lakeville, and we very firmly planted our roots back in my hometown. My husband was already very involved, but I became very involved in the community, running volleyball programs. I also worked as a physical therapist in Minnesota for about 12 years. I worked in both a large clinic system, hospital system, and a small private practice, so I got kind of a wide variety of exposure to healthcare. During that time, my husband and I also ran a small investment real estate company, which we kind of gave up once we had 3 kids in rapid succession. During this whole time, we've been running a small business for volleyball programs in Lakeville too. So we've been very rooted in the community the entire time I've been here, or since I came back. After I had kids, I became kind of a super volunteer in both my church and my kids' schools. 3 years ago, or 2.5 years ago, I started teaching college biology as a career change at St. Paul College, so I became an educator. A year and a half ago, I chaired the Vote Yes campaign. We had a 68% yes vote, which was the highest in the metro area, and from that, I sort of got recruited and encouraged to run for office to be a more progressive voice for our hometown, and that's why I'm running for office. Thanks.
Thank you. If you could pass it down, Ms. Peterson.
Thanks, Glenn. My name is Roz Peterson, and I'm running in House District 56B. I've been married to Tim Peterson for 27 years, and I have 2 kids that just graduated from Lakeville South High School, so we're empty nesters. And I used to be in the drugstore business for 20 years, and we had up to 4 drugstores, but one of them was here in Lakeville, and that's really when we started to get more and more involved with the community. Through that, after we sold our drugstore in 2006, I served on the Lakeville School Board, and I've been there for the past 8 years, and I'm the current chair. Some of the awards I've received over the years is I was just honored as the Dakota County Exceptional Businesswoman honoree, and the Lakeville Chamber Business Person of the Year in 2009, and the Spirit of Caring Award from 360 Communities. I've also served on statewide boards, the Minnesota School Boards Association, as well as the Minnesota State High School League. Then I've also served as president of the Lakeville Chamber and past chair of the Dakota County Regional Chamber, and I also serve on the Lakeville Chamber Foundation as the chair that funds the business education programs that the chamber runs. I've been a Hosanna member since 1988, a 360 Communities volunteer, Hope for Tomorrow mentor, Girl Scout leader. If you want to know more, just go to my website, which is rozpeterson.com. And I'm hoping to use my private and public sector experience to bring balance back to the state legislature. And as a Republican endorsed candidate, I'm hoping that we can bring some fiscal responsibility as well in making sure that our spending priorities are in tune with what's happening in our communities. So one-party control has resulted in unionizing home care providers, building luxury office buildings for themselves, 3 business-to-business taxes that were eventually repealed, and a failed Obamacare exchange. 15% increases in spending have, that's the end. All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Mack.
Well, good morning, and thank you so much for having us here today and taking the time out of your busy schedules to come. I am Tara Mack, and I represent Apple Valley and part of the northeastern part of Lakeville. I am serving in my 3rd term at the legislature. I was first elected in 2008, and Lakeville is actually a little new to me after redistricting in 2010. I lost part of my district, which had been Burnsville, and I acquired the northeastern part of Lakeville. So I've really enjoyed getting to know more and more about this community. I'm a lifelong resident of Apple Valley. Grew up in that community, graduated from Apple Valley High School, went to the University of Minnesota, lived around a few different places for a couple years, and then ended up moving back with my husband to Apple Valley, where he is actually a pastor on staff at River Valley Church. And we have 2 little ones. And in 2008, I was first elected, and since then I have served primarily on 3 committees at the legislature: the Health and Human Services Finance Committee, Health and Human Services Policy Committee, and the Tax Committee. And so I spend a large part of my time on issues related to healthcare. I have been a member of the Apple Valley Rotary, had been involved in various chambers over the years, spent a good amount of my time doing a mentorship program at the high schools with young students, particularly young women, wondering what potentials are out there for them as they grow into their careers and decide what they want to do in college. And it has been a true privilege and honor to represent a community that invests so much in their young people. I am a product of that, and it's a big reason why I decided to run, was because this community has raised me. There's a lot to be protected, and there's a lot that we've seen happen in St. Paul over the past 2 years that raises a lot of concerns. And so it's an honor to represent you. It's an honor to be here today, and I look forward to our discussion.
Great. All right, we'll start this first question then for Ms. Willingham. Remember, each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer the following question, and it is a 2-part question. We'll start with transportation. The Met Council's priorities for transit and high-speed rail seem to be taking resources which should be used in suburbs like Lakeville for transportation and congestion relief. What are your feelings towards the Met Council's priorities in transportation and transit, and how would you work to ensure that suburbs like Lakeville receive the support that they need for transportation?
Okay, my family is in land development and land brokerage sales, so whenever I come on an issue like this, I like to talk to people that work in the industry. So I talked, of course, to my family. They run Gagne Land Company, and I said, hey, how do you feel about these issues? How do you feel about the role of the Met Council? How do you feel that we're doing with the Met Council? And I won't tell you exactly what they said, but I'll kind of interpret. I think the Met Council is just an incredibly powerful and important organization. And I think anytime there's power and there's impact, I think that there's sometimes disagreement as to how things should be done, just like at the legislative level. So they expressed that there was some frustration from the suburban communities with how things were being rolled out. So I think that's important that the Met Council take that into account. I'm sure that they do, but maybe there needs to be a little bit more dialogue with that. I don't envy you, Wendy. It's really a tough thing that the Met Council has to do. They don't have to just consider us. You know, we care about the suburbs. We care about Lakeville. They have to consider the cities, and they really need to consider the entire state of Minnesota, because we have goods and services traveling across the cities through the entire state of Minnesota. So I just applaud them for what they're doing. I think sometimes it can become political because there's appointed positions. Anytime that there's a government appointed position, I think that it can get kind of interesting. So what would I do to change that? I really think that that's why we're elected, is to fight for Lakeville and to fight for what we think is best for our particular town. We do have a congestion problem. I think we need to look at ways to kind of ease the congestion. We need to look at more transportation options for people in and out of Lakeville. And so that's what I would hope to do, is to just fight for what's best for our community. Thanks.
Ms. Peterson.
Thanks, Glenn. You know, recently the Dakota County Commissioners petitioned the Met Council because they were concerned about the mismatched priorities. They have more funding for transit and not enough for roads. And I think that there's been a greater discussion with Governor Dayton's Met Council's Thrive 2040 plan, which is really focused on urbanization. And I think it's really, at least this is what our local officials have felt, that has really left the suburbs behind. You know, if you look at the 35W bridge, it seems that there's an accident on that interstate every day. And I think we need to start looking at priorities of adding a lane or addressing this river crossing that affects all of us, whether we can take the bus rapid transit, which tends to be a good mode of transit for people that offers flexibility and options, versus trains that cost billions of dollars and takes away funding priorities to really have mobility within our road system. So I think we need to work together to find common sense solutions that work for everybody in a multimodal system, but it can't be all transit and not addressing our road system. I think our road systems need to be addressed first, and then we can look at other alternatives after that.
Great. Ms. Mack?
I think what we have seen over the past several years and with the implementation of the Met Council is what I would consider a huge misprioritization, way too much weight put on transit at the expense of our roads and bridges, and really at the expense of a lot of people in the suburbs and in the rural areas. I've been door knocking over just off of Dodd in Lakeville, and the people are just happy as a clam because their roads are finally getting resurfaced. And these are just residential roads, but they fought and fought and fought for years for that in terms of getting their roads elevated to the level they needed to be so their kids weren't hitting potholes while they were out riding a bike. That is one microcosm of the huge issues that we are seeing at the Minnesota Department of Transportation, and it's being exemplified by the decisions being made by Met Council. And the fact of the matter is Met Council is not elected, and you simply have a massive issue when you come into that. And people are not served well when they don't have the ability to have a referendum on those making huge decisions with their tax dollars. And frankly, at the legislature, it has been very difficult to implement any kind of change within Met Council that would truly serve all Minnesotans better because of the political makeup at the legislature and because of the political nature that Met Council has taken on. So we could, and I'm sure later Mary Liz will speak to this in some of her comments and a lot of the work that's been done to try and go even for small implemented changes to bring more accountability to Met Council, to make sure that our local elected officials, our city councils, our county commissioners have more say in what's better for the citizens that elected them. We've come up against a brick wall every time. So moving forward, we will continue to fight that battle. I hope that we have some change in November to bring more balance, at least in the Minnesota House, to put some more pressure on what Met Council needs to do to be more responsive to the desperate needs of the roads and bridge systems across this state.
Great. Mr. Kosnick?
Transportation is a core function of our state government, and Lakeville should expect safe and efficient roads. Transportation simply just needs to be prioritized. Here again is another example of out of balance in state government. The Met Council Transportation Policy Plan for 2040 has $30 billion planned for light rail and mass transit, and only 11 for roads and bridges. We need to prioritize better and an opposite ratio to favor road and lane expansion. Planning was done without the input of suburban counties like Dakota. It favors the core cities and needs to be more balanced. The plan doesn't align with the travel behavior or the population growth of suburban areas. We can't have a transportation plan that uses funding as a reward for desired housing choices. The Met Council has been overstepping its purview and needs to be brought under legislative committee authority or eliminated. I'm glad to see that the 5 suburban counties came together to meet with the Met Council and to ask for a reevaluation of the transportation plan. I will listen and work with the county on our transportation needs at the Capitol. And another way that I would support Lakeville transportation is to work with the Alliance of the South Metro Districts, which Interstate 35 passes. Working on a safer freeway system in the South Metro should be an area of bipartisan effort. South Metro districts should try to prioritize our needs and work with MnDOT to match those priorities. An area of mass transit that I would support expansion is the bus rapid transit systems, especially off Cedar Avenue. Buses are less expensive than light rail and more flexible. Thank you.
Great. We'll bring the microphone down to Ms. Peterson, and we'll move on to taxes. So Minnesota ranks in the top 10 of the highest state income taxes. What are your thoughts as to how this could be improved, and how has the current tax revenue increase impacted or improved the business climate?
Taxes, one of my favorite subjects. You know, good tax policy should promote economic efficiency and growth, equal taxation for equally situated people, and it should be simple. Generally, we should favor a low tax rate across a broad base. And high taxes on a narrow base are destructive for Minnesota economies because people change their behavior. And I think that's what we've seen so far in this state. We have Medtronic that is talking about leaving. If you don't believe me, I'll tell you, door knocking, I can't tell you how many people have changed their residency because of the unfavorable tax environment. So you have to look at a process that is transparent, that looks at all the taxes that we pay, and obviously make sure that we're prioritizing our needs and matching those revenue sources to follow that. But right now, Minnesota ranks 4th in the nation for personal income taxes, 7th highest in sales taxes, 3rd highest in corporate taxes, and is ranked 47th in the business climate. This has to change if we're going to be able to move forward and make sure that we remain a prosperous area. Business don't pay taxes, people do. And if we want to help small businesses grow, we're going to have to start looking at pass-through entities and things of that nature so that we can make sure that we can continue to grow the small businesses that pay a large percentage of these taxes as well as the property taxes. And for example, businesses pay 13% of the taxes, or excuse me, they represent 30% of the market value, but they pay 31% of the taxes. So I recommend that we revisit how we look at our tax structure so that we can make it equitable. Thank you.
Ms. Mack.
We all as Minnesotans know that we have a great quality of life. It's why many of us choose to live here despite the horrid winters. But we have beautiful parks, we have a great education system, we are working on our transportation system, but in general I think Minnesotans share a great quality of life, and I think on average people are willing to pay for that quality of life. But what we've seen happen in Minnesota recently is we continue to make ourselves less and less and less competitive with our neighboring states in our region. Our tax structure is parallel with the coasts, and we simply are not able to compete. And as a result, we're seeing businesses move to Wisconsin, South Dakota. We're seeing those states advertise in Minnesota to take our businesses into their states. And this is a huge concern. I think case in point is the fact that in 2013, you saw taxes and fees raised on every Minnesotan by the Democrat majority by about $2.3 billion, and that's a conservative number. What did we see in the next fiscal year? Month after month after month of declining revenue. Wouldn't you think that if you're raising taxes, your revenue number should be going up? That is the logic that many of the leadership in St. Paul have had. But the problem with that is when they run their numbers, they do static numbers. They don't account for people changing their behavior. They don't account for people saying, you know what, it's not worth that tax bill anymore. And so people move, or they find ways to put their money other places. They diversify. People are creative. Financial planners are creative. And that's what they're supposed to do. And so I think that we just need to take a serious look at what we are trying to penalize in this state. And when you raise taxes on people who produce, they will either find a way to produce elsewhere or they will not be incentivized to continue to produce on behalf of your economy. That is simply the way human behavior works and the economy works. And again, we all want to pay our fair share and we all want to continue this great quality of life, but we got to return balance.
Great. Mr. Koznick.
Thank you. The top 10% of income earners in Minnesota pay 40% of all state and local taxes and 58% of income taxes. That's a pretty heavy reliance on a small segment of Minnesotans. To continue to ask more of those that are most able to relocate or leave the state is not sound or just policy. Let's also not forget the increased corporate tax and the sales tax on businesses. Business taxes get passed on to consumers and result in higher prices and lower wages. The lower and middle income Minnesotans end up paying a higher percentage of their income and wages in taxes when that happens. We need to work to flatten the tax rates and foster a culture that celebrates hard work, success, innovation, and entrepreneurism, and not squash it. Being fiscally responsible with the state budget and fighting back the growth of government is the best first step to lower the burdens of taxation. We can't continue down the path of the last 2 years where spending has increased over 12%, which has far exceeded our economic growth. I've campaigned on bringing a balanced and sensible approach that focuses on the core tasks and delivers those services more effectively and efficiently. We should be very concerned with the impact of tax increases, especially as families and businesses struggle to climb out of our long recession. It's very concerning that state revenue has failed to meet budget projections for a number of recent months in a row. We are seeing that tax increases are hurting businesses and family budgets and stifling the economy. It's time for a balanced approach that respects a family budget.
Okay, Ms. Willingham.
Hi. I would say taxes and education are the two issues that have come up the most at the door. So this is obviously a very important issue, not just to Lakeville, but statewide. I mean, it's a very, very important issue. I think we absolutely, positively have to look for efficiencies in the way that we tax. So the things that you're talking about, I think some of that is an efficiency problem. And I'm not opposed to bringing people in from the outside and analyzing our taxation system, saying, hey, how can we do this better? How can we do better with the money that we're taxing individuals, families, businesses? I agree that small businesses shouldn't be the ones carrying the biggest burden. I think that our communities, absolutely, small businesses are the fabric of any community. They're the fabric of our state. And so I was very happy that they repealed the business-to-business taxes that were originally part of the tax bill. Here's what I'm happy about that happened, and I think anybody that's involved in the local school systems would agree that paying $2 billion back to the schools in the state of Minnesota was a very good move on the part of the legislature. I don't think there's one school official that would like to give that money back. Okay, we hired teachers. We stabilized a really difficult school system. We were laying off teachers. I know Roz didn't enjoy doing that. That's a tough job. So I was very happy that we were able to pay that back. As far as the effects on local businesses, I do actually think that keeping our school system healthy helps the local businesses. Those are new people that are spending money at our local businesses. They're buying homes in Lakeville. They're getting mortgages in Lakeville. And so I think it's not as much, you're talking about a more direct effect. I think indirectly there are some benefits to at least putting our taxes toward the school systems. Thanks.
Good segue. We'll start down here with Ms. Mack. Last night we hosted our Lakeville School Board Candidate Forum. And in regards to education from a state level perspective, are you in favor or opposed to changing the current funding formula for the schools? If so, what do you propose? And the second part is, do you believe more financial decisions should be passed down to the local level? And if so, what do you believe would be the benefit?
Sure. Well, it's a big question. It is a 4-part question. And if anyone in the room is familiar with how education finance works, it is a logarithm that you don't even want to start to touch. So I'll try to start simple. Yes, the funding formula absolutely needs to be changed. Many years ago, when that funding formula was first developed, it was in a climate where Minneapolis and St. Paul had very unique challenges because of poverty, because of language barriers, socioeconomic issues that trickled into the school and what teachers had to deal with as a result. Therefore, students in those schools tended to get a bump to try to meet some of those needs. The fact of the matter is, many of those issues that used to be unique to St. Paul and Minneapolis have spread into the suburbs. In District 196, I believe we have 72 different language specialists. I'm not sure what it is for 191, but it is just remarkable, the special needs challenges, the socioeconomic challenges that have spread into the suburbs. And so that disproportionate funding formula is no longer justified. A student in Apple Valley, a student in Lakeville should get the same as a student in Duluth, as the same as a student in Minneapolis, for those schools to steward and meet the needs of their individual kids. And so a couple years ago, when Republicans had the majority in the House, we were able to do some tweaking to that formula in compromise and working with the governor. We didn't quite get exactly what we would have liked, but we had a starting point of things that we can aspire for. In terms of the other question in local decision making when it comes to education finance, I think it's only fair to the citizens that their local elected officials have more of a say over their finances. There are so many mandates handed down from the state, and when a citizen is frustrated with what their school board is doing, they don't know who to point the finger at, because very often the school board doesn't have a say in what they can and cannot do with those local tax dollars and what's best for their schools. So we need to create more freedom for our local elected officials to do that.
Okay. Mr. Kosnick.
I firmly believe that education is the greatest investment that our state can make. We absolutely need to change the current funding formula. For Lakeville students and families, they deserve their fair share of state funding. We need to make the per pupil formula more equitable and even. Minneapolis schools receive almost $5,000 more per student, and the funding gap between non-metro and metro school districts has widened 9% under the Democrat control the last 2 years. Our suburban communities are tired of being the ATM for Minneapolis. Our parents work hard, get their kids ready to learn at school each day, and they deserve their fair share. Districts do need the freedom to handle and make financial decisions, and for more effective use of tax dollars, there are over 330 independent school districts in the state, 3 just in our Lakeville House District. We need more local control for better local results. I will work to minimize the state mandates to schools, especially mandates without additional funding. In fact, I would have opposed the anti-bullying bill that will cost districts throughout Minnesota $20 to $25 million a year. Along with more local control comes more accountability. We can reduce the amount of standardized tests, but we must insist on high achievement levels before a graduate receives a diploma. Too many graduates need remedial classes in college, and school districts need the freedom to make more decisions, including staffing decisions to keep their best teachers regardless of seniority. I will keep and work hard to keep students first in education.
Great. Ms. Willingham, before you start, just a reminder to the audience, if you have any questions that you would like to address to everybody on the front table, please bring them up to Tim. Sorry, go ahead.
Hi, education is my passion along with healthcare, so I'm really excited to talk about this. I actually wouldn't disagree with either of the two candidates to a certain extent. Last year, I chaired a levy campaign. We put a lot of work in. We mobilized a lot of people to get that done because we were very much struggling with what it is that we were given under the current funding formula. I also have some personal experience with St. Paul students. I teach a lot of those students at the college level. There are many, many students that have, I do see firsthand some of that minority achievement gap, and some of those students absolutely are not ready to pass my biology class. They just absolutely don't have the life and the academic skills. So I know that there's a difference, and that's why the funding formula was originally set the way it was. But do I like having to pass levies every 2 years in the suburbs because we're not getting enough money? No, I think that just because suburbs can do it doesn't mean that we should make them do that. And so I think that I can agree with a little bit more balance toward Lakeville in the funding formula. Do I think that local school districts should have control over their spending? Yeah, Lakeville is a very different district than, say, Cold Spring Ricori or St. Paul. And we have maybe different needs, and I would like our school board officials and our administration to be able to decide how those dollars are gonna work to help our students have the best educational outcomes. We absolutely positively need to, more than anything, spend our taxpayer dollars on things like education. Those are things that pay back. So things like all-day kindergarten, even I think we should be focusing a little bit more on preschool education, because those things have been proven to help people be more college and job ready after graduation. Thanks.
And Ms. Peterson.
Thank you, Glenn. I want to just concur with what John and Tara have already added, and not to be redundant, I'm not going to reiterate those items, but in our Constitution, our children are offered a free public education, and so it is something that is crucially important. However, the funding formula comes in a book that's pretty darn thick, and it's complicated, and it's not equitable. So we do need to address different student needs and the funding that comes with it, but there's definitely discrepancies within the metro and through greater Minnesota. And at the end of the day, a kid is a kid, and they deserve to have the best education that we can provide because it is in our state constitution. One of the challenges that I've seen on school board is that our funding comes in these silos of money, and the money that you have a lot over here and you need it over here, and you have no discrepancy on where you can spend it. And if local school boards were given the opportunity to have flexibility so that they could be more innovative with the money that they have, I know we could be a lot more efficient and a lot more effective. We've had better student achievement, and we'd have a lot happier students, parents, and teachers if they were given the people who are closest to the issue the control, because I guarantee you they care.
All right, and we're going to start with Mr. Kosnick on this next one. In regards to healthcare, MNsure has gotten a lot of press lately. Do you see underlying problems with the program, such as change in life circumstances? And if so, what would you suggest to make the program different? And it is a two-part question. So when you have talked to local business owners, what feedback have you gotten as to how healthcare has affected their businesses, and how have you responded to that feedback?
Thank you. Yes, there are underlying problems in MNsure, big problems. While well-intentioned, MNsure is simply an unsustainable model that has failed to meet its own benchmarks. Projections were for 1.3 million people to sign up, but just over 200,000 people actually did. The disappointing numbers will result in a greater cost to taxpayers. MNsure isn't just an extremely expensive, failed website rollout. It also isn't delivering on the promises of more affordable and better care options. It's unacceptable when a woman has a baby or a family needs to add another to their plan that they have to wait 4 to 8 weeks to find out if they're eligible for coverage. Healthcare is a major area that we need to work together with Democrats to fix. We can find ways to make the program more affordable and provide better care options. I would start by allowing insurance companies from other states to compete for our business. We can work to bring tort reform to limit liability and lower the cost. And third, we can reform the dozens of mandates that are driving up the cost. For instance, the mandate that men are required to have pregnancy coverage. And finally, we should provide a better incentive to expand healthcare savings accounts. When I've talked to business owners and employees are disappointed with Obamacare and MNsure. It's raised the cost of operating a business and lowered the health benefits that employees have been offered. We should continue to provide a safety net for those that are unable to get insurance on their own, or if they face a pre-existing condition. I'm hopeful that Republicans and Democrats can work together to make the system better and more affordable.
I agree with John that we need to work across the line to address this issue. I think healthcare is the single biggest issue that we're encountering. School districts are affected by the cost of healthcare. Families are affected by the cost of healthcare. Businesses are certainly affected by the cost of healthcare. I worked in the healthcare industry, and I can tell you that just like Roz says with school funding formulas, healthcare is an interesting business, and it's an interesting animal. It's a difficult thing to get right. The reality is that we had millions of Minnesotans who were uninsured. We had billions of people nationally that were uninsured. Federal government came up with something and mandated the Affordable Health Care Act, and the choice we had in Minnesota was take that and make that federal program ours, or create something on our own, and that's how MNsure was created. I am glad that Minnesota decided to do something that was best for Minnesotans. Did they roll it out in such a way, and is it a perfect product? Obviously not. There were definitely problems in getting people signed up. The website wasn't, made it difficult for people to sign up. I think the recent pullout of an insurance company, I think that's cause for concern. We absolutely have to work across the aisle to kind of fix these issues. What's the second part of the question? I'm sorry.
Talking to local.
Okay, talking to local business owners, honestly, healthcare hasn't come up. Their primary concerns, I'll say, hey, what's important to you? Their primary concerns are taxes. Their primary concerns are the business climate. But I think it does affect local businesses, and we do have an obligation to work on healthcare. I really want us to focus on preventative care services as a state. Healthy people save us money. Many of our diseases are lifestyle diseases that are absolutely positively reversible, and that's what I'd like us to focus on in the healthcare arena.
Okay, healthcare. Here we go. Minnesota has been the epicenter of the lowest cost, highest quality healthcare in the nation. We led the charge, and when Obamacare was brought to Minnesota with MNsure, now we just have higher rates, and there's a lot of concern that I've heard from whether they're constituents or businesses that they're not going to have the quality of care or the choices in their doctors. For example, Stacy was on a major medical plan. She had insurance before, but with this new rollout, she now couldn't get insurance, but then when she finally did, it was significantly higher, and she doesn't have the choices that she had before. So it feels like we're really gone backwards and rolling out a $160 million website that costs another $64 million to maintain every year, and it doesn't even work. Plus, bonuses were paid out to executives on a failed website. You know, these types of oversight and implementing a program that we could have taken the federal one instead, that wouldn't have cost us any more. But one of the reasons I think it failed is because they didn't include any insurance experts. There's health care and there's health insurance, and they left the health insurance people completely out of the equation, and it's probably one of the reasons why we're now seeing an increase in rates at 12% statewide, and many of them are in double-digit 49% premium increases. So we need to work together to fix it on patient-centered solutions, eliminating the costly mandates like John talked about, and then helping businesses self-insure so that they can get control of their costs and reduce those very important things before they have to start affecting other employees by cutting them or turning them into part-time employees.
Ms. Mack.
Well, I'm going to start with the second question first, if that's okay, because when I start talking MNsure, it can go for too long. So I'm just going to make sure I touch on the small business one first, and that is that I have heard from many small business owners, and what many of them are telling me is that their backs are against the wall between the decisions of paying much, much more to provide the coverage that they want for their employees and doing right by their employees as they want to do, or paying the fine and not providing insurance and sending their employees to the exchange, which they know is going to be a miserable process for their employees, and say, best of luck, I'm paying the fine to the government, but I just can't afford to pay for what I'd like to for you anymore. Small business owner after small business owner is giving me the same scenario. And I really don't like to be the person that says, we told you so, but this is truly something. In 2013, when MNsure and Obamacare was coming to Minnesota, we pled with leadership at the Minnesota House and Senate and the governor and saying, listen, this is what is going to transpire if we implement this stuff. And sure enough, it is coming home to roost. On the issue of MNsure, I sit on the Legislative Oversight Committee for MNsure, so I live and breathe this stuff. Just a couple points I want to make. It is in crisis mode right now. You know, there are so many things that need to be fixed. The board needs to be downsized. The 86 employees and the 5 public relations people that are making well over $1.2 million collectively need to be corrected. One thing I just want to correct, you heard last week in the news, rates were going up on average about 4.5% in Minnesota. I hope all of you really look closely at how the math was done on that by the governor. Basically, they took all the plans. It's like if you took Bill Gates and then 4 other lay people and you averaged out their net worth and said, okay, if you average that all out, they're all worth about, $2 billion if you average them all out. That is the math that governor and Democrats and the Commissioner of Commerce did to tell us what those rate increases were. So it was a disservice to Minnesotans, and that is not what the average person is seeing in their rate increases, and it is a failure.
All right. We do have a write-in question. We'll start with Ms. Willingham. So, as you all know, Lakeville is home to the second largest industrial park in the state of Minnesota. So, as a representative of Lakeville, what can you do to help promote that and recruit businesses to our area?
I sat down with the city of Lakeville and talked about issues like this. Okay, how can we increase? I think everybody in Lakeville is interested. How can we increase business growth? And maybe the industrial park is a great place for us to start. And one of the new kind of creative ways that Lakeville is doing it is they're implementing some tax increment financing districts. Sometimes that's not popular with some people, but I do think that we need to do things like that to create opportunities for businesses to come in. If we don't have a climate like that, we do want to create sort of maybe tax incentives for businesses to come in, and I think we can do that locally, and I think we could do that legislatively, is just create a better climate for especially small businesses. People that I know that have tried to start small businesses, they have difficulty getting loans. They have difficulty in that first year. I've even talked to some small business owners that it takes a long time to develop a small business. And so I think anything we can do in creative ways to create better loan opportunities, the tax increment financing, I think is one creative way to do that. And if we could do that more at a legislative level, I would be in support of that for Lakeville too.
Great. All right. Ms. Peterson.
As a commercial realtor, this is my job. I am constantly trying to get businesses to come into Air Lake Industrial Park. And one of the nice features about it is it has an airport, it has rail, it's close to highway infrastructure, both on the east and west side. It's on the south end of the metro, and so it's easy to get to Minneapolis and St. Paul, as well as moving goods and services into northern Minnesota. So it's really a well-located, attractive location. But some of the challenges that we've seen is the anti-business climate, unfortunately, that we've been stigmatized with, as well as the higher property taxes. Those are the two things. As soon as I tell them what the tax rates are on a per square foot basis, they hang up on me. So those are the types of things that I think would help drive more businesses to Lakeville, and obviously getting it on the radar screen. There have been a couple of new programs through DEED that was a result of the Itasca project, that we could really be a one-stop shop for people who are looking for relocation of businesses. And so we've seen a little bit of improvement on that, and we just have to make sure that Lakeville is also a part of that process. But truly increasing or improving our business climate would be the best step.
Ms. Mack.
I think the answer lies in a lot of what we've talked about over the past several questions, a holistic approach. I think the issue of whenever you're trying to recruit more jobs, more businesses into the community, those businesses that you talk to, as most people in this room know, you're wondering about the infrastructure that's in place, the roads and the maintenance of those roads. You're wondering about the property taxes. You're wondering about the predictability of those taxes. And for your business model, predictability in those expenses and your budgeting are very important. And when you talk to businesses outside of Minnesota, the volatility that we tend to have in our state budget, in our tax structure and things like that are a big deterrent. I think one thing that does attract people is our good schools. When they're looking at, we want to bring head of household jobs into Lakeville. We need to be able to attract quality families that want to raise their kids here. So they do look at the schools. They look at the quality of life. So there are many components that these businesses look at. But one of the huge ones is the volatility in the economy and particularly what politicians are doing in St. Paul with their taxes, because that's one of the only X factors that they don't have a whole lot of control over, but it will be imposed on them and it will affect their bottom line and their ability to stay competitive. And so it's a larger question, but I think specifically as it pertains to Lakeville and that industrial park and that huge asset that it is to this community and the citizens who live here, it's really the big answer of we need a better climate here in Minnesota that businesses are attracted to, so that we can start advertising over in Wisconsin and Iowa and South Dakota, and to the angel investors and the people out there that are looking to put down roots, but they want to see some predictability and they want to have a better understanding of what they can expect when it comes to their taxes.
Mr. Kosnick.
Thank you. The Air Lake Industrial Park is a great asset to Lakeville, and I think I'd start with acknowledging that government doesn't necessarily create jobs, and we shouldn't be picking winners and losers in businesses, but government can create and needs to create a better environment for businesses to want to grow here in Minnesota, to expand, and not to be afraid to hire more employees. One of the main things specific for the Lakeville Industrial Park is we've talked about transportation. County Road 42 is over congestion right now. In the South Metro, we need another east-west corridor. I'm looking forward to working with our Dakota County commissioners and the Dakota County to have the County Road 70 become another major thoroughfare in the South Metro. Another thing is the less regulations and repeal outdated regulations so that businesses can continue to grow here in Minnesota and specifically in Lakeville. We want businesses to take risks, and we have a unique situation in Lakeville, being right off the freeway and off of Cedar Avenue, our proximity to the Twin Cities, and we need to take advantage of that. So transportation is very important, but also repealing and making repeal old regulations that are outdated. And then also take a look at what was proposed 2 years ago on businesses, the increased warehouse taxes, the service-to-service, business-to-business taxes on services, and the repair taxes and telecommunication taxes. Luckily, Republicans were able to bring enough Democrats along to get those taxes repealed, but the fact that they were passed in the first place scared a lot of businesses from coming to Minnesota in the first place. So we need a better environment for businesses, and I think more specifically to your question is improved transportation for those businesses.
Great. All right, if you want to pass the mic down to Ms. Peterson. You all did such a great job of staying on time. We're going to allow for 2 minutes for closing remarks. So we'll start with you, Ms. Peterson.
Well, thank you to the Chamber for hosting this event, and Crystal Lake Golf Course for also having a wonderful lunch, and all the people that are here today. I think that you've heard a little bit about some of the issues that have affected businesses in a negative way, and how we're hoping that we can bring some balance back to our state house, because the Senate's not up for re-election. We don't know what's going to happen with the governor's race, and the House is really where who are closest to the people we can really make a difference, to make sure that we can hear all viewpoints so that we can get the best ideas and pass those policies and do what's best for hardworking Minnesotans like you. I've had the pleasure of serving for 8 years on school board, and that will come to a close for me no matter what, the end of this year. And it surely has been a pleasure for me to serve you. And I have always been active in this community, and I always will probably, because I do truly love it. And it's one of the reasons that I'm willing to make a sacrifice with my family, with my job, to serve you at the state legislature. It's important to me to reflect your values and your opinions at the state legislature. So from there, I just wanted to ask you to go to my website, which is rozpeterson.com, and I ask for your vote on November 4th for Roz Peterson. Thank you.
Ms. Mack.
Well, thank you again so much for having us. It is always great to have the chance to share a little bit about what is happening up in St. Paul and the goals for the future and moving forward. And I just want to say I would love to hear from anyone in the room, business owners, people who are dealing with and have boots on the ground on a lot of the issues that we're talking about. In my world, and it's all the time I spend on healthcare, I would really love to hear what you guys are facing, dealing when it comes to healthcare, MNsure, things of that nature. So I'd really love for you to follow up with me if that's of interest to you. You know, I think when you talk to the average Minnesotans and their Minnesota nice ways, they like balance. They like a balanced approach to mostly every issue. And I will say it's been a frustrating 2 years out of the 6 that I have served. The past 2 have been the most frustrating simply because of the lack of balance at the legislature and the inability to truly force compromise, to force really good dialogue on what's best for the whole of Minnesota, simply because of the one-party control that we've had. And certainly we've gotten a lot of good things done. I do like to tell people that for all of the contentious, ugly things that the news reports and politics, there are a lot of things that we vote on that are unanimous, that you know, the whole thing lights up green. We've come to a good solution. But on some of the biggest issues facing Minnesota, the things that we talked about today, taxes, healthcare, education, they do get contentious. And there is usually a very good solution in the middle. And when you have one-party control, that's tough to do. And so I'm hopeful in November that Minnesotans will strive for that balance again, and that we'll see that, and that we will work through some of the very difficult challenges that are coming at us these next 2 years. And frankly, the course needs to be corrected quickly, particularly in the area of taxes and healthcare, because Minnesota is headed down a road that's simply not sustainable. So thank you so much. My website is taramac.net. Please visit if you want more information, and I'd love to hear from you.
Great. Mr. Kosnick.
Thank you. Again, thank you to the Chamber for organizing the forum again this year. Those of you here spending your afternoon with us, and those at home, thank you for taking the time to educate yourself and learn about the issues and the candidates. First off, I want to thank my opponent for, I admire her and her efforts, and I appreciate you, and you've made me a better candidate, so thank you. Today, I'm asking for your vote for John Kosnick for House. I think I'm the best candidate because Lakeville deserves a leader that has long been engaged in the community, but also understands the private sector and the everyday decisions that families make. It's an honor, and I'm proud to help families finance their dream of home ownership, and I've been blessed to be able to do that. I've worked with thousands of families and know firsthand the impacts of increasing taxes on their budgets and in their jobs. This is an important asset that's lacking in the legislature, to have private sector experience. Over the last 2 years, we've seen over $2 billion in tax increases, spending increases up by 12%, and a $90 million legislative office building that nobody asked for. Clearly, it's time for balance in our state government and to end complete one-party control. It's time for fiscally responsible, sensible approach that focuses on the core functions of our state government, our education, transportation, jobs, and healthcare. Please vote for John Kosnick for House and visit johnkosnick.mn.
Ms. Willingham.
Hi there. I'd also like to thank you for being people that are politically engaged and politically active. I think for much of my life, I'm embarrassed to say that I wasn't. And just in recent years, I've come to understand how absolutely positively important school board positions are, city council positions, certainly a state representative position, Dakota County Commissioner. Those people are representing us, and they are impactful positions, and that's exactly what drew me to this. I like to do things that have impact. Sometimes that means I'm leading a Bible study group for women or for my 6th grade daughter. Sometimes that means running for office. This really wasn't in my life plan, but once I understood kind of what the job is, and I would say that talking to legislators that have served, they've said, you know what, we really do work across the line more often than people think. And that very much attracts me, because I think that's what's missing in politics. There's too much finger pointing. People at the doors are telling me they're just sick and tired, they're weary of partisan politics. And so I agree that we do need balance, and we need people that are moderate, but also want to work to get things done, especially for the city of Lakeville, and that is what I have already done. When I championed the levy, we worked with people of all political persuasions, different ages, and we got something positive done for the school district in Lakeville here, and I would like to champion those same kinds of issues if I was elected representative of my hometown. I absolutely, positively adore this place. I clear my schedule every year for Panaprog Week. I go to everything, and I plan on doing that again. Like Roz said, I'm going to continue to work in this community regardless of the outcome, but I just ask that you take a chance on a new type of candidate in Lakeville and new type of representation by voting for Amy Willingham. And my website is amywillingham.com. There you go.
All right, well, I'd like to thank each of the candidates for attending today's State Legislative House Representative Candidate Forum. I'd also like to thank the production staff from the City of Lakeville for videotaping today's forum. It'll be available on the City of Lakeville's public access channel and also on our Chamber's website. The Lakeville Area Chamber of Commerce has not and will not endorse any candidates in any election year. I hope all of you have a great day, and remember to vote on Tuesday, November 4th. Thank you.